Thank you again for everybody joining us. Let me take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Edgar Sasueta. I'm the Senior Director of Policy and Government Relations here at AXA. But today I actually get the privilege to serve as the moderator for today's conversation. And that, as some of you probably came to today's session, as seen the information, we one of the things we've been proud of here, just as we've all been struggling to adapt, I've lost count, last 6-7 months, is we really, over the last couple months, tried to put a focus on what are the needs for our site administrators. So often we get caught up with some of the systemic issues, and we're talking about state guidance, and we've been having all kinds of forums, but and this is really credit to some of the members on our team and hearing perspectives directly from the field. What is it that we can do to directly serve those folks that frankly are fighting and fighting to just keep our kids safe, to serve our students who day in, day out are really on the front line. So that was really one of the catalysts for us starting this site administrator series, the site leader series. And as we've been having some of these conversations, one of the themes that we would always get asked about, that there was always a focus, is this whole notion of social emotional learning and strategies to help support not only your students and your staff. And as we were thinking about some of these conversations, this became a natural focus in terms of having a session for us to come together and try to share some of those best practices. One of the things you will notice today, and actually I'm excited to see it because all of us we're probably all zoomed out, right? And we've all been doing a lot of webinars. And as much as I love watching myself only on the camera, I actually don't. You know, if you have to stare at yourself at the camera, one of the things that we miss just in being in a completely virtual environment is this whole notion of just being able to see faces and having people react. I'm sorry, as my son turned on the TV here a little bit. Nico, can you turn it down just a little, please? Real, he's done with his distance learning, and it was time for him to do something else, right? Yeah. So one of the things we decided today is just let's mix this up. Let's not do the formal webinar format. Let's throw it on there. Let's see people's faces. That we'll try to encourage a little more engagement, participation. If people are feeling what they're hearing from the participants, we're going to see it. If they're not, we'll also see that too. But I think that's part of the beauty of having a little bit more of this interactive conversation. So with that said, we got a ton of great content. And I want to make sure to give as much time as possible to our participants to get into their presentations and to get into the dialogue. So I'll do introductions in 1 second. I'm going to say this a couple of times, and you're probably going to get tired of me hearing this. We really do want it to be interactive. We actually selected a few of our members who, you know, through references, through what we've seen firsthand, are obviously leaders in some of these fields, but by no means do they have all the answers. And we know that a lot of you are doing some of this work. And frankly, we want to learn from some of you as well. So we're going to encourage folks to really utilize the chat as you're hearing things that resonate, as you're hearing strategies, things that may be challenges or things that are working. We really want this to be interactive. So please utilize that chat and let's have some engagement, both as we're having the conversation firsthand, but also as we could have another side conversation there. So our panelists today, I'm excited to go down the list, and then we'll have them give a little bit more context about them and their story. Our first panelist is going to be Joanne Hansen. She's a principal from Washington Elementary, and that's in El Centro. So we'll hear from her in just 1 second. Buck Rogman, who you know a lot of you, one of our leaders here at AXA, we've been fortunate to benefit from his expertise and his skills in a number of areas. And he's a principal at Forest Grove Elementary in Pacific Grove. So here's with us today. And then we have a tag team, if we will. Then this is kind of fun, where we have Tom Carroll and Tony Alberts, both from the principal and assistant principal, respectively, from Morale Middle School in San Jose. And what's interesting about that, and we want to kind of highlight, is how so much of this work is a team environment, and how you really have to rely on your fellow administrators and your fellow leaders to really implement that. So interesting to hear kind of the perspectives jointly from Tom and Anthony on that area. So to start off, we're going to ask everybody, and we're going to try to make this. I'm going to attempt to not make this a moderated conversation where every question is going to come back and forth. I'm going to ask one. We'll see how this goes. But to start off, I am going to ask all of them to just give us a lay of the land. What's happening in your schools? You know, what's the current landscape? Are you doing distance learning? Are you in person? Just kind of how are things going? I know that when we see all of our fellow leaders here, it's just like, how are things going right now? And then also maybe talk a little bit about what brought you to this conversation. What is it that has really get your interest in this whole issue of social emotional learning? And why does this resonate with you? So Joanne, let's start with you and just kind of let us hear what's going on in your end.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Well, with social emotional learning, I'll get into that. But as far as my school right now, we are in full distance learning, as I'm sure a lot of you are. I know that we've considered hybrid in the future, but as of right now, it's purely distance learning. With social emotional learning, I've actually been an advocate for social emotional learning specifically for about 8 years, where I started implementing different kinds of programs, survey, I love data and all of that to see how things are going. But what I found is that during any challenging time, it's actually an opportunity to use it for positive relationships. And so this is no different. I'm really excited about talking about social emotional learning and that we're all talking about it as well.
Thanks, Joanne. Let's go to Buck. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in your neck of the woods. And obviously, I know you're very passionate about this area and what kind of brings you to this conversation.
Edgar, thanks a lot. Much like Joanne, we've been in distance learning since we closed on March 13th of last year. And really the big challenge that we're facing now is we're trying to consider whether or not to apply for the K-6 waiver. And that's kind of elevated some of the stress and anxiety among our staff members as well as our parents. So that social emotional learning point becomes really pivotal now. I think the thing that really kind of awakened me to social emotional learning when I became a principal at a K-5 school is walking around to the different classes and truly understanding at a very innocent level just how a child needs to feel safe and needs to feel loved before they can begin to learn. It's something that I understood kind of in my gut when I was a high school teacher and coach, and it was things that I was aware of. But I think that to be really conscious of it and have it at the forefront of my mind, working with the little ones really made it evident that not only children, but the adults that we work with and the parents that we work with need to have that social emotional base for them to operate at their best.
That's awesome, Buck. I just, just that resonates so much just from all of us, right? And no matter what capacity, this whole notion of just feeling loved and feeling supported. So thank you for that. Just putting that focus right away. And so we'll start with Tom, but we'll also give Tony a chance to chime in there. Just tell us a little bit about what's happening at your school and in your community.
Certainly. Well, hey, thank you very much for having us today. It's a pleasure to be here. Being in San Jose, part of Santa Clara County, we have moved into the orange tier. So while we're in full distance learning right now, our district actually just signed an MOU yesterday to bring back SDC students starting on November 30th. So, it's a tough dynamic right now. About 30% of our SDC students have actually expressed interest in coming back. We're pulling our teachers right now because that would be a voluntary option for them to come back. So we are moving in that direction slowly but surely. As far as social emotional learning goes, it's something that clearly it's been a top priority, I think, for just about all of us. And something that I think, resonated with me that Buck stated is Tony and I, we've really tried to focus on not only supporting our students, but how are we supporting the adults? As the site admin, how are we supporting the teachers, the parents, in order to then benefit the students? I know Tony can go into a little bit more about that.
Tony,
that's my intro.
Nice handoff there.
Yeah. No, I mean, so, Tom and I are both relatively new admin. I'm in my 4th year and he's in his was it 6th or 7th year off and on. But honestly, just coming in, like the reason I was brought in was to help heal like a large divide that had been created in the staff. I mean, honestly, social emotional is something like Buck said when I was a teacher, even before I got into education, you know, when I was managing stores or customer service, like all customer service, as far as I can tell, is social emotional learning, like trying to help the customers deal with whatever issue they got. And so I kind of brought that into education, or just brought it with me. It's not something new. And what we really worked to do is just kind of like standardize it. Last year and the year before, I was lucky enough to work with Yvonne on the mental wellness task force that AXA created, and just trying to come up with processes and tools, and with a lot of people who have a lot more expertise, quite honestly, bring it together and share something that people could access. And we try to bring that in a small level back here. You know, and I agree with Buck, like if you don't start with love, one for yourself, but then for your staff and your students, then how can you expect your staff to give it to students? And how can you expect students to share that love with each other? So that's kind of where we start.
Yeah, you guys, in your introductory comments, I think you give us a good framing, right, of these two buckets about taking care of the students. And I love like what Tony just said, that but you can only be as good for the students if you're taking care of yourself, or you as leaders taking care of those on your staff. So let's start with the adults, because I do think, you know, we take pride at AXA that this is all in the benefit of students. But I think in this situation, if you're not making sure that the adults are in the right place, then how can we put our best self forward for those students? So let's start with some of the strategies that you're utilizing to kind of meet the adult needs, the mental health, the social emotional needs of your staffs. And let's start with Joanne, and we'll start, and then we'll go down the line on this one.
Oh, well, thank you. If you don't mind, everyone who's here, do you mind putting on the chat what is something that you do for yourself to try to make yourself feel happier and take care of yourself? If you give yourself a time a day to breathe, if you let yourself exercise, if you don't mind writing some things while I'm talking about what it is that you do for yourself, because if we're going to ask our staff to do it, we also want to take care of ourselves. So for the staff, that's one of the very first things, being able to model it, being able to talk about how things are difficult for us as well, so they have something to relate to. And then when we listen to them, and during our meetings, I know right now, even as I'm looking through the room, when I'm speaking to you, you notice I'm trying to smile at you. I might act a little more animated. I'm asking you questions to try to see what you have to say. And when you notice something, I call it reading the Zoom room, right? So right now, for instance, we could try to read the Zoom room. And if we notice that people are sitting like this, then we know that perhaps we want them to speak up or ask someone something that's going on, to share things. So that's one of the very first things, is in our meetings, trying to listen and trying to genuinely show that we care about what people are saying. So for instance, I'll just give one example. We started having one of our first staff meetings, and the teachers had just had 30 minutes with their students on a Monday. So they come in and I see everybody just very quiet. I don't see as many smiles. And I start trying to ask them, hey, how'd the morning go? And figuring out what's going on. And it turned out that they were really stressed out. It was a Monday. They only had 30 minutes with their students to talk about what was going on for the week. And all of a sudden they have to hurry up and get to our meeting. So what I did was not just listen, but show them that you're going to do something, right? So the following week, I said, okay, well, how about this? Next week, let's start at 9:15, or one time I started at 9:30. Another time I made the meeting optional, where they can watch something versus having the meeting. So just one thing that I would for sure recommend, which I know most of you do, is really listening, reading the Zoom room, and then trying to show them that you are listening by an action that you do as an immediate response to what they said. So that's one of the things that I would mention.
That's wonderful. Thanks, John. I think some great practical advice there. And I love how your question just triggered a ton of engagement there about things that folks are doing. And I like the balance. There's your glasses of wine in there as well, which I think are needed. But, you know, some of the getting moving around, talk of the gratitude journal. So love that. Buck, let's go with you.
Edgar, thanks a lot. I think that one of the things that I tried to do to give staff a little bit of guidance in terms of self-care is in our newsletter that we have for our staff. Because our name is the Forest Grove Falcons, there's a lot of bird-themed kinds of sections within the newsletter that I send out weekly. But there's one that's called Building the Nest. And it'll be any kind of a tip with regard to self-care or health, so that the teachers can put that focus, and our staff can put that focus on themselves before they start to care for others. Personally, I'm very much a morning person, and so I also am one of those guys that's driven by routine. So for me, having a little bit of exercise in the morning, and then also some time to be still. One of the things that I find is that as soon as I enter the work world, there's very little time to just be still. And so in the quiet and solitude of my home in the morning, I'll unplug and just allow myself to be still. It's funny because my mom, our family had five kids, and there would be times where I'd walk into the family room and I would just find my mother sitting there quietly on the couch, staring straight ahead. And I don't think I truly understood what mom was doing until I became an adult myself and had a child myself and had a busy, noisy life going on around me. That must have been such a wonderful time for her to relax in the morning. I would say that the other thing that I encourage our staff to do is to keep a gratitude journal. I saw that go through the chat, and it has worked wonders for me to help program myself to see things that are positive at a time when it's really difficult to see the good. And then finally, I think that the last thing that I would mention is just the importance of trying to shut down as much as you can once you leave school. For those of you that have a family at home, you're going to have a spouse and you're going to have children that are counting on you when you get home to be either mom, dad, or husband or wife. And for me, having that healthy marriage and having a good family life, boy, goes a long way to dealing with anything else that comes up on the plate. So there's just a few things.
Thanks for that, Buck. Tom, I would usually go to somebody with the Giants banner last, but given last night, I'm even Giants fans will get love on this day, given that I'm still riding the high from last night. So let's go with Tom.
I was gonna say 2020 just keeps getting worse, man, and all of a sudden the Dodgers have to win it. No, just kidding. But in terms of support, I think Joanne and Buck, they've made some great points, and I think it comes down to also, just respecting time. Right now we all have, our time's constrained already a lot, and our teachers are burnt out on Zoom. Our teachers are on Zoom constantly. So just thinking of, when we're holding our meetings, making sure that what we need to discuss are things that really need to be put on that agenda. Is it something that we can put in an email? Is there information that's strictly informational and doesn't necessarily presented in a meeting? I like, what Joanne has said about giving the opportunity for optional meetings. I think, because right now, at the end of the day, that's when our staff meetings are. And while our time is limited with our staff in those formal settings, just honoring that time and making sure that it's as valuable and productive as possible. And one of the things we do in order to reinforce mental health in our staff meetings is we do an honors and accolades, and so it's a constant agenda item. It's the last thing we do. And it's where staff can recognize and honor each other, for whatever it might be. And, it's been really interesting with distance learning because you've got teachers now or staff members for that matter, who typically, maybe they haven't been recognized as often in the past, but because they bring something really unique to the table right now. I mean, some of our teachers are thriving in this environment, no doubt, and our students as well. And so we have teachers who are really coming out of their shell, providing strategies, resources, programs that they're using, and our teachers are finding, that they're tapping on teachers they've never talked to before, and so really providing that time in our staff meetings for those honors and accolades. I think it helps build culture, it builds trust. Having that peer feedback is just really rewarding. And that's something that we found to be beneficial for supporting SEL at the adult level. And Tony, I don't know if you want to talk about, what we're doing in terms of our online thing, but go ahead.
No worries. Well, I mean, so there are obviously some benefits to having an admin team as opposed to being the single admin on site. And so obviously you're going to have to adjust some things. One of the other things that we've definitely been doing, I'll talk about the online one in just a second, but one thing that we've been able to do is kind of divide up the work. And one thing I've taken kind of head of is actually kind of monitoring, kind of like Joanne was saying, like monitoring the teachers. And when we start getting, the excessive emails, that, the grimace, I've taken the lead in like reaching out to that teacher in particular, and Tom will do it as well. It's, definitely a shared task. And so we communicate a lot, but we definitely reach out to teachers and just offer like the one-on-one meeting, even if it's socially distanced, on site, because I think there's something about, that as much as as much as it's great to see the face online, there is something completely different about even being 6 feet away and just saying like, hey, like, are you doing okay? Like, how can I support you? And, we've done that with a couple of teachers, and I know they've really appreciated it. And honestly, you can see it just, again, like we were just mentioning today, one of the teachers that we reached out to about 2 weeks ago, she's looking better. She's doing better. We're not getting as many emails. It's one of those things. And again, it's not about that. It's not about getting less emails, but it is about making sure that, the staff is healthy. Because again, now she's able to better help her students as well. The thing that we started kind of lightly about 2 years ago. We actually have a recognize a staff member form on our website. And we're still tweaking how the system works. This year we got feedback from teachers again, so we've changed kind of how it's working again. But essentially it's just a form, and all of our staff members on site are listed, from custodial and kitchen up to, myself, all the teachers, office members. And about once a month, I just send out a reminder to all the parents and students and just say, hey, like, if you could, please take a moment, go to our website, click on the form or click on the form in the email, and just recognize somebody for going above and beyond. Because, as much as Tom and I go around, we try to do that. We're 2 people, and I mean, we have like almost 700 kids. Like, it's a lot easier for the 700 kids to see something happening that's really going real well than us. And so then I'm able to share those, our staff is required, and again, it's going to change depending on your school site, but our staff has asked for them to be shared privately. So I send, emails at the end of the week, and I just say like, hey, like, here's all the positive feedback you've gotten over what you've done in class. Thank you. And it's just, kind of similar to like the gratitude book. It's a gratitude book from outside. And, I definitely have in my teacher bin portfolio my letters from my years of teaching when kids have done and created something for me. And so I'm just trying to be more conscious about that. And that one I know a lot of teachers have really appreciated, especially on the hard weeks. So.
Yeah, and to build on what Anthony is saying, also, for instance, you can think outside the box, right? So you can have this, the slides that I saw in the chat, right? And you can also, for instance, send cards home to each of your staff members that say something personal about each one. It's amazing how much that means to them receiving a surprise card. So for instance, on World Teachers Day, what we did was each teacher, by the time that World Teachers Day arrived, they all had, and including other staff members other than teachers, they all had a personal card, and it said open at 9:10. So it was going to be during our staff meeting, and then they were able to all open it. So you can think outside the box, and also, you know, how he mentions recognizing certain people, recognizing people that are not normally recognized, and taking advantage of the situation where you have more time to give recognition in other ways. So for instance, custodians, making sure that we celebrated National Custodian Day, making sure that your supervisors, your pupil supervisors, if they're on site, that we do something for them as well that's different. So those are some ideas. And you know how he mentioned also where it's slides, I saw that's the slides, the email, at the staff meetings. Well, just like we like using email, or we like slides, or we like it in paper, thinking about how staff likes things differently too. So UDL, Universal Design for Learning, for our staff. So for instance, if you don't mind, I'm going to share something. We know that teachers have a lot of emails, right? And so they might have difficulty reading all of their emails. Am I right? Yes? Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Do they read it? Do they respond right away? But they get so many emails. Or some of you have a Google Classroom. Do you have a Google Classroom for your staff? Any of you? If you do, that's another way, right? You can have a Google Classroom. And in addition to that, if we want the teachers to model to the students, and then we want to model to our staff, then for instance, we can have our own, for instance, classroom for teachers and staff members. So for instance, they can have references to things that are not just in an email format, not just in a newsletter format. They have different ways of finding out the information. So here, for instance, there's links to everything. So someone might work better this way. They might work better with having their Google folder. They might work better by having their Google Classroom. They might work better with emails. And so there's just different ways that we can try to celebrate and communicate with staff based on their needs. Just like we like it, right? We like different ways.
Thank you for that, Joanne, and thank you for, again, offering that practical example there. So you guys led me to one of the questions I was going to ask you. All of you touched on communicating with your staff and trying to engage your staff. So by all means, if you want to, others want to offer up other strategies, but maybe more specifically too, if you could think about staff meetings. How are you utilizing these times where you're bringing your folks together? What does that look like now for you? And what are you trying to do with that time designated to bring your teams together? Buck, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think one of the things that's been kind of nice about the staff meetings is that the attendance for us now is combined. The staff meetings typically used to be mostly for the certificated staff at our site, because the CSEA, you know, their work day had ended and they weren't getting paid to attend our staff meetings. Now in this virtual format, because it's so easy for people to get to the staff meetings, I think that just by having it on the screen, we've more than tripled the attendance at our staff meetings. One of the things I always try to do, you know, in our staff meeting is just to recognize the effort and the work that everybody's doing, and open with just appreciation for the folks that are helping to keep school and learning alive for us. You know, as I look across the screen at the faces of all of you hardworking site administrators, what's really kind of fun for me to see is it's really easy for me to see myself in you, that I completely understand a lot of what you guys are going through, because I'm going through that exact same thing. And when I'm speaking to staff, I want them to understand that too, that I know what they're being asked to do isn't fair, and that is really, really hard. And so I think that what I always try to do is start the meeting off by appreciating the effort and the work that they're doing. Also, we keep the questions running in the chat, so that we have that ability to have some interaction. So it's not just me talking at the screen and everybody listening. We're going to have a pretty big staff meeting on this Friday that's going to talk a little bit about how to craft the reopening plan and kind of put together those nuts and bolts of the safety standards that we're going to put in place to make everybody feel like they can come and teach students and be safe about it. And I know that that's going to be kind of touchy. So I'm going to want the staff to feel like they're in a safe place to share their thoughts and share their feelings. And then I think it's really important to wrap back at the end with an honest expression to the staff about just how valuable they are to you. You know, I've just, you know, it's humbling and it's inspiring, you know, to see what our staffs have been doing at this time. You know, like my favorite part of the day by far is when I can just skip around from, you know, Google Classroom to Seesaw Classroom and just go from kindergarten to fourth grade, from fifth grade down to second, and see just the remarkable way that our teachers are showing up for students every day. Upbeat, positive, enthusiastic, almost willing the students to learn through the screen. And so when I'm privy and I have the pleasure of being able to see that, I want to recognize our staff in front of everybody else for that kind of work that they're doing. So Edgar, it's that kind of tone, you know, that we're trying to set. And, you know, I think that's been pretty effective as far as the virtual staff meetings go.
Thanks for that, Buck. No, I love that. I could see how that would be appreciated from your team and the folks that are working in partnership with you. Let's go to Tony, and then we'll go to Tom about what you guys are doing and how's it working on your end.
Well, I do think it's unfair that you keep letting Buck and Joanne go first because they have really good answers, and so I'm going to steal a lot of that. You know, I mean, realistically, it is more, again, kind of a combination of everything as far as our staff meetings go, like making sure that they are as narrowed down as possible. So it's specific, focused, it's to stuff that's applicable to what the teachers actually need to know and what they need to take away. We have that time for celebration, and definitely those acknowledgments on our end of, you know, what we're asking and what we're supporting them with. But I think a secondary part of the staff meetings is the teachers at times get so overwhelmed, especially middle school, when, you know, you have 165 kids possibly that you see throughout the week multiple times, that they don't get the one-on-one stories. And so, I mean, obviously, since the office staff is, you know, we're a multi-tiered support school or systems of support school. And so, you know, sharing honestly the stories of kids with staff at that time as well. Because there are a number that, you know, it's not something you really want to put in an email, especially, you know, and so unfortunately, sometimes our staff meetings can be a bit of a downer when we're doing those sorts of updates. But I do know the staff, you know, appreciates it. You know, there's a student, maybe they've been freaking out and they're not getting anything from, you know, and then you have to share the news, like, you know, unfortunately their father passed and this is what's been happening. We haven't had a chance to update you because of, you know, X, Y, and Z. And so, you know, just making sure that you're also reminding them kind of continuously while you're supporting the teachers and staff emotionally, to be supporting the students as well. And that, you know, during this time, while education is incredibly important, you know, just reminding them that our kids mentally, like while some are doing well, there is definitely an increased number that are struggling emotionally and academically. A lot more of those, you know, students who've never been on a radar before are suddenly on multiple radars. And you know, trying to, again, appreciate the humanity of the situation, and really emphasize that with the staff. And I think they've appreciated that. And actually, we made one staff meeting this year. We kind of voted as a staff not to have it. And then afterwards, like, even though the staff voted not to have it, they were all really angry that we didn't have the staff meeting. So it was one of those situations where it's like, okay, well, we're clearly doing something right during these. But, you know, in trying to meet everybody's needs, not everybody gets happy. So just trying to remember that as well as you're moving forward.
You're definitely doing something right if your folks are upset when you don't have a meeting, right? That's not everybody could say that. So, Tom, anything you would add to that?
Well, I think, oh, sorry. I'll just say, I think one of the things that people like is the fact that we have, like what Buck said, our entire working staff community together, our paraeducators, you know, our custodians, kitchen staff, they're all able to be in these meetings, which, you know, really presents some unique opportunities, you know. But I just quickly wanted to add two things we do also in our staff meetings right now is we always try to give them at least one thing that they could walk out and try to do in the classroom tomorrow or the next day. So we do a tech tip, you know, and we've done it for a while, but it's even more applicable now. So we have someone on staff provide some type of tech update, you know, 5 minutes of something that they can do, a strategy that they can go and try in their class. And while it's not PD, it allows us to, again, build some, you know, build a little bit of professional development into the staff meetings. And then the other thing is allowing for shared leadership. You know, naturally there are agenda items that Tony and I, you know, we need to cover, but whenever possible, we try to allow our staff, you know, teachers, paraeducators, to take agenda items and present them and lead those conversations. And I think by allowing for that shared leadership, we do get more buy-in. Our staff, as much as, you know, I'd like to think they love hearing from us, I think they actually appreciate even more hearing from their colleagues. You know, and then it's just, you get the more buy-in and it's just more authentic, you know. And so I think allowing for that shared leadership is really important right now. And we found that to be beneficial.
Tom, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you come into the staff meeting after a group is gathered, the conversation and the chatter is just downright joyful. People are so excited to be back in the presence of each other, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's true.
I know while we were talking about staff meetings and some of our preparatory work, I know Buck or Joanne and either one of you could jump in there. And I thought this was kind of powerful, almost modeling some of the pieces that you utilized. I don't know if either of you want to kind of jump in there, but I thought that would be a good time to.
Sure. You know what, Edgar, one of the things that I had no idea the impact that it would have at our school until we started doing it had to do with having a mindful moment. And the way that we started the mindful moments at our school was a way to help our students calm their minds and calm their bodies after lunch. That one of the things the teachers came to me and said was that after lunch, they were really wound up and that it was taking a while to get them to calm down to be able to focus in the afternoon. So I wanted to try to find a way to support our teachers. And so what we started to do at the end of our lunch period was to sit all of the students down on the playground, and we would have a mindful moment. The other thing that helped us with this is that we've got a social emotional learning program that's called the Toolbox. It's from the Toolbox Project. And you have 12 different tools. And the first one that we have is called the breathing tool. And the literal tool that they model it after is a tape measure, right? A tape measure goes in and a tape measure can go out. So there's a hand motion that accompanies each and every tool. And then there's a little motto that goes along with it. And this one says, I calm myself and check in. And so when our schools closed, one of the things that we kept on doing was a mindful moment done by video. And what I started to find was the parents started to join the students for the mindful moment. And when people would start to see me, whether I was in the grocery store shopping or anything like that, the kids would say, hey, Mr. Rogoman, I saw you on the mindful moment. And it's really not that hard to do. And so if you don't mind stepping out of your comfort zone with me, I'd like for us to be able to take just a moment to find some calm and to find some peace, maybe at the back end of what's been a pretty busy day. I'm going to ask everybody to take out your breathing tool. Remember, it's a tape measure, just like the kind that you would use to measure, you know, the granite that you're going to put on your countertop after you get that raise, right? So take out that breathing tool, and when you take a nice deep breath in, you're going to go through your nose, think good thoughts, and all the bad thoughts you're going to breathe out through your mouth. Breathe in and out. Good thoughts in. Bad thoughts out. In. Out. In. And out. Then we finish off our mindful moment with just a message for the day. Usually it's a message about something that we're really grateful for. Or sometimes it's a message that goes along with whatever tool we happen to be using. We have an empathy tool, a garbage can tool where you throw away the little things and you don't let them bother you. There's 12 tools in all, and I'll put a link to the Toolbox project in case anybody's interested. I'm not affiliated with it in any way. We just use it, and it really works well for our school. So that's one of the ways that we've brought kind of the practice that we have done, live and in person, and turned it into a virtual format. So thanks.
Thanks, Buck. I'm always amazed the power of breathing, right? Just the simple power of breathing and just how it makes us feel better. John, do you want anything you want to add there?
Yeah, and so there's so many different social emotional learning programs. Hopefully you sometimes go to the CASEL website where they have guides for different kinds of programs, and this one seems wonderful. Thanks for sharing. In other ones as well, they talk about breathing, for instance, in conscious discipline, if you ever look that up as well. They talk about specific ones that not only the students can use, but we can use as well, because it always is, again, with us, especially us, we get stressed, right? Just a little bit, a little. And so these are some things that can help us. So there's two different ones I'm going to show you. So one, I feel like I need to be closer to the camera, but one is you have your hands, right? When you twist them around, you go in front of each other like that, and then you make them together, and then you hold your hands down, and then you take your tongue inside your mouth and you push it up towards the roof of your mouth. So you're putting pressure. So you're crossing your left and your right brain, and you're putting pressure to make your blood flow. So you do that, and what you're causing is like as a child to an adult, you're making sure that you're able to connect all parts and that you're making sure it's pumping through. So then that way you're able to make those better decisions and you're able to calm down. That's one way, and it's not so obvious to people. So if you teach students or you do it in a meeting, you can't even tell if I'm doing it if I felt stressed out even at a meeting. So that's one way. And a second way is similar. What you do is you cross your feet at the bottom. So you're sitting down, you cross your feet. And then you take your hands, your fingertips, and you push them together. So it's the same concept. You're crossing your left and your right, and you're causing your blood to flow through. And so it's the same idea. So what's neat about these is that it seems like a lot of students like these because they can do them in class without everybody really noticing what they're doing. So those are a few that hopefully find relevant.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to put you on the spot there and sharing some of your tricks and tools there. You kind of already led us naturally to, as we're starting talking about the adults, but some of these strategies obviously can be focused on students. But let's go a little bit deeper there on now student engagement, communication, trying to really meet the challenges Tony was talking about, kind of the challenges that we know a lot of our students are facing. So whether it be strategies or just communication, how are you really thinking about this now with the focus of the students, given the natural barriers that we have now in terms of these screens and not being able to have them there in person? Let's start with Tom.
Sure. Well, again, we all got into this occupation because, we want to impact students' lives. I know that for me, the best part of my days in a normal year is when I'm out of the office and go out and play basketball at lunch, walk around, walk through classrooms and see students engaging in the lessons. And I think, it's been really difficult, finding ways that we can stay connected. And so, Tony and I, we've tag teamed how we are communicating with our students. I send a Monday message every Monday, uploaded onto YouTube. And it started off with just introductions. Hey, hope you're doing well. But we've slowly started to navigate into, book recommendations, tools that they can, hobbies that they can try to start. And so we will do the Monday message. Tony follows it up with a Friday message and just allows the students to see us. They want to see us, they need to see us. And so being able to provide those videos every week has, but in addition to that, home visits. And home visits have kind of gone different ways right now. Sometimes we try to find reasons to make a home visit if we can. So whether it be a student of need, we will go and try to make that contact. But just last week, we started up a club. It's a sculpting club. And we had ordered a bunch of materials that needed to get to students. And we were trying to think, okay, we've got 12 students who need to get these materials. How can we do it? I was like, you know what? I'm going to go drop them off. And so got in the car, got their addresses, went to each home. I got every single student. They each answered their door. Some of them, again, didn't feel comfortable with me going too close, understandable, left it right there on the doorstep. But I was able to see the student and they were able to see me. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like my principal's at my home and it's something positive. I'm getting these materials and just seeing the joy on their faces, it was amazing. And so I think taking time to find ways to connect, whether it be, digitally or in person, keeping in mind all the safety protocols and whatnot, it's important. So I don't know if Tony to add on, because I know he's taken other approaches as well.
Yeah. I mean, so something, again, so my big one was the Friday videos, and I started those pretty immediately last fall or last spring. We were out for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then that April I released the first one. And again, like the purpose was just to provide like updates for kids, because I know a lot of information was going home to parents, but I realized that during that time, the kids were also freaking out and they just kind of needed to know what was going on. And so was providing that. But I also started incorporating like other aspects of things I had done before. There was a moment where I was at one of our elementary schools, kind of helping cover for a principal who needed to be out for a little bit. And when I was doing the announcements there in the mornings, one of the things I stole from, I don't know if you guys saw the video. I don't know. I cannot remember the educator for the life of me, but he was a high school principal on the East Coast. And he ended like every morning announcement with, I hope you all have a good day and I love you. Like, if you haven't heard that today, just know that. And so I did that at our local elementary, Majestic Way. And the first day I did it, like teachers came in and they're like, I had like kids sitting in my classroom crying when you said that. So I was like, okay, well, I do love them. I hope they're doing well. Let me go check on that crying kid. So, just making sure they're good. But I guess, I think it's something about like, especially males, like hearing that level of affection come from a male figure was a positive for them. And so that's something I end every video with. Like I end every video that I record with, I miss and love you guys and I can't wait to see you. And so, just, trying to, again, I do recommendations at the end. I recommend books or hobbies, podcasts, YouTube channels, video games, comic books. I love all that stuff anyway. So I'm like, why not share it? And then this year, because I realized I was like, okay, I'm slowly getting more to just old guy stuff that I'm recommending. I started soliciting recommendations from kids. So they email me recommendations of stuff. And I share that. I say, from, I'll say the student's first name, Pradeep recommends this book, or Natalie recommends this YouTube channel. And I do vet it, obviously. But, I think it's just something to get their mind off of that distance and get them engaged with something, anything that will help them deal with what's going on. And so that's kind of been my large emphasis, the kind of the video things. I do get carried away. I accidentally released a 20-minute one last week because of progress reports. So that's way too long. Aim for like 6 to 7 minutes if you do videos at the most. But the occasional long one won't hurt.
I love the idea of just asking the students for their recommendation. I'm sure they get a thrill out of when they get a shout out and they made your list there. John, what would you add to the conversation here?
Well, those are some wonderful things. And by the way, in the chat, I'm reading some of your ideas, such as the lawn signs. I know that, for instance, Richard Sanchez is here from my district, and he shows that he really tries to think about things as well. So, for instance, you could think about what kinds of programs, but remembering always that you might have a designated social emotional learning curriculum, but just like ELD, it really needs to be integrated all day. And without the integration, that designated time just isn't as effective. And so it's about integrating social emotional learning and truly understanding it. But also to make things simpler, there's certain programs, for instance, like Suite 360, that they are pre-made lessons for students that you can push out and assign, which makes the teachers' lives easier as well. And the lessons are based on their levels. There's videos, and you can read it in English and Spanish, and it reads it aloud to you. Also, like the lawn signs, that's a great idea. I know, for instance, Mr. Sanchez brought up other kinds of ideas, because right now we need something extra to motivate students. So he, for instance, looked up Classcraft. And so it's really about trying to find something different that might be needed during this time or afterwards. Also, you know how we talk about having a safe space, right, for students? So trying to think of how they can have that safe space there. Sometimes we get so caught up in having the students there all the time that we don't remember that if they were in the classroom, especially elementary, they would need to have time away. And speaking of that, a little twist, do we have a safe space at school for adults? And if we don't have one, then it's a good idea to create one. So then that way teachers are able to see it and staff is able to see it, and then the students can have that. But also with the students in class, it's really remembering that choosing our battles, right? So if the student, for instance, has their blanket on their head, but they're paying attention, trying to advocate for that not to be the battle that we choose. You know, if the child is finishing their egg sandwich, that's not necessarily our battle. And just making sure that we think about that, keep reminding regarding that, it helps as well. So that way we think about that. One little fun thing that I do is I used to do knock knock jokes every Monday. So I would do on the intercom because it's a play on words. You had to be at school on time to hear it. And then it also gives you something to talk to me about. Even if they're older and they think it's ridiculous, they're still laughing. So it still is something fun. But what we did was, now that we went to distance learning, is we do video knock knock jokes. And so there's always a way to do something a little fun, a little out of the norm in this period of time. So those are some things that can help with students. And I do want to give a shout out to Richard Sanchez for that idea as well.
Thank you.
So we need to do a knock-knock joke, don't we?
Really put her on the spot, right?
Absolutely.
What was it?
I said we need to hear a knock-knock joke.
Sorry, I can actually hear.
That's all right. That's all right.
And I can show you some, and then you include your custodians, your staff in the knock knock jokes, and then it makes it even more fun. Maybe we should do a knock knock joke then at some point.
That's really putting you as fun. But Buck, I'm going to ask you to touch on the same question, but we did get a good question in the chat that maybe you could integrate. What's the integration of this SEL strategies? How do we balance those with the academic needs?
Well, one of the things I think that's nice about the SEL strategies is that a lot of what we talked about isn't really time intensive, you know, and I think that it's more an approach and a frame of mind, right, that you enter the class with every day. And so in terms of like what we do, you know, the mindful moments typically take about 1.5 to 2 minutes every day. And then one of the other practices that we have at our school is called the caring circle. And either it'll be teacher-led or counselor-led within the classroom. And we go around the classroom and each student gets to talk about either something that they're grateful for or something that's weighing heavily on their mind. And it allows our students to empathize with each other and show that they truly care about each other. As far as like trying to still you know, keep pace with instruction and to make sure we're meeting the academic demands that are required of us. One of the things that's been nice about the distance learning is it's allowed us to kind of thin out some of the standards that we're responsible for right now. And our teachers have really done a great job of identifying what is the most important. Also, I think that in this distance learning format, more than ever, we understand that students aren't going to be able to keep up with a pacing guide if those social emotional needs aren't being taken care of, or if they don't have an opportunity to enjoy the learning that they're doing. So a couple things. One is that if you make the math lesson enjoyable and interactive, you are taking care of a person's social emotional needs that way. If you know, students are being called on and valued in those academic interactions, that is social emotional learning. If you're modeling the tools that we have as part of our social emotional learning program while you're teaching, that also is social emotional learning. So it's not like there's a social emotional pie that's going to eat into the work that teachers do. That social emotional practice has to soak the work that they do. Look at it.
I'm sorry, I have to add to that because Julie Adams, for instance, I'm sure a lot of you have seen her, right? The woman with the, a lot of the hair, and she's very vivacious. And so she always talks about Maslow's before Bloom's. You can't get to self-actualization without going through Maslow's first. Thank you, Buck. That was great.
Well put.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just going to say, you have to touch the heart before you can reach the mind, and taking the minutes to do that mindfulness is going to increase output of your students. It's going to increase engagement, the benefits of taking that little bit of time to do that. And I absolutely agree that it's an approach. And I loved what you said, Buck. Thank you.
What's clear, we could talk about these issues for hours, and just you folks and the folks on the Zoom could just be sharing information, and hopefully there's opportunities in AXA, obviously facilitate to continue to share some of these strategies. I think to finish off, maybe to bring you back to where most of you started, is talking about the self, right? That you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of your teams, before you can take care of your students. So just one thing that I know some of you have touched on is how do you stay so positive on a day-to-day basis? And, and with just any final thoughts or advice that you would give to all your fellow leaders as we continue to think about, because obviously the challenging times, there's no end date here, right? And what your motivation to get after it obviously is going to be challenged. So just kind of close us out on that. I'll start with Tony.
All right. Well, I mean, my first and foremost message to every member on here is that you are more than enough for what is needed right now. Everything you are doing, someone appreciates it. Trust me. And it might not feel like it. It might feel like, you're overwhelmed. And I'm going to say, I'm just going to go on a limb. We're smiling now. I'm sure that for every person on this panel and everyone in here, there's definitely those days where you're just like, so I'm just going to sit under this desk and cry for 10 minutes. Let's just get it out of the system and move forward. But I think, whether you're doing it consciously with Buck's gratitude book, I mean, for myself, it really is about just, telling people just genuinely how much I care for them. That helps me, just reminds me all the time that I need to make sure I'm telling people I appreciate them, I appreciate what they're doing, that I love them, and that I'm happy they're a part of my life. And I think that keeps me in that hopeful spirit. And this is not for everyone, but I have some very close friends who we do jujitsu together, and every Monday we try to kill each other. And so that balance of both trying to kill someone and being very much loving to them, I think it's important to have some sort of physical outlet as well as an emotional outlet. And if you don't have those, I mean, reach out. There are plenty of people out there. They're your colleagues in your district. I'm sure you've got old college buddies as well. During this time, just reaching out is a huge thing.
Thanks, Anthony, for those final thoughts. Tom, let's go to you.
Sure. I think spending time with my family, both Tony and I have 2 young kids. Our kids are actually the same age, 6 and 3, or yeah, about there. And so spending time with them, and that's really been my outlet, taking them for walks, going on the scooter. But I think right now it's really difficult finding that balance and that, where does work stop and your home life begin? When you're in this, I'm home right now. And so one thing that I've done, just one strategy, is on Friday night, I actually take my email off of my phone, and I do not put it back onto my phone until Monday morning. And that way, if someone needs to get a hold of me, they know how to get a hold of me. If there's an emergency, I'll be available. But my email is not on my phone. Now, I'll still check my email throughout the weekend. But if I don't have my email on my phone and I'm out playing with the kids, I don't have that temptation to just constantly be checking. And I would find myself sitting there trying to push my kid on the swing, checking my email. And so being able to disconnect like that has actually been very beneficial in just my overall mental health.
We could all learn something from that. Thanks for that, Tom. John, what would you add?
For me, one of the main things that helps me is to focus on this, and hopefully it helps you, and it really has helped my staff. And I keep saying it over and over again, and it's to focus on what's within your control. Try to let go of the things that are not in your control, but also remember what is within your sphere of influence. In addition, helping others actually makes me feel better. So, and there's actually some research behind that. But so whenever I'm really stressed or I'm not the best person, like after I have my coffee right away, when I'm in that mode, what helps me the most is when I'm actually doing something for someone else. And so for me, it's a little different. I totally understand about completely taking off your email. But for me, I actually take off the stress of my staff, and I tell them it doesn't mean I'll respond right away, but that they can write to me whenever. So if they can't go to sleep because they're thinking about something and they want to write to me, then I want them to have that gone. And then they know that they got it out of the way, and then I can go ahead and respond when I can. So for me, it's helping others, and it makes me feel better, and focusing on what's in my control, out of my control, and really taking advantage of any sphere of influence. So thank you all for listening. I'm really happy.
No, too. Thank you for that. Two different strategies, but I think a lot of merit and value to, going in both directions. Buck, you get the chance to take us home here. Final thoughts on what would you offer?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I want to do is thank everyone for being here, because if there's one thing that life has taught me, the most valuable gift that we have to give anyone is our time. So thank you for spending this past hour with us. It really is an absolute honor to get a chance to share some thoughts. I think the one thing that I would leave folks with is just realize how much courage and strength that you do have within you. Anyone that takes on the role of being a site principal has a heart that is 10 gallons inside of them. And so realize just how much courage that you have and how much strength that you have. Think back to the challenging situations that you faced in the past, that teachers, when you tell them about those challenges, shake their head and say, I could never do your job. That's the kind of strength that you have. The last thing that I would say, folks, is that if you can come up with a plan for when you find yourself flat on the mat, that can pick yourself back up, that if you can find kind of a go-to recipe of things that you do when you're down that are going to pick you back up, try to have that. For me, it's the gratitude journal, it's getting out and moving, doing some exercise, and putting a little bit better food in my body. That if I do those three things, usually I can get myself turned around and feel a little bit better about myself. Do those things for yourself that make you proud of yourself. That will help you get off the mat in hard times. And remember, you all have a ton of courage and a ton of strength.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that, Buck. And just on behalf of everybody here, just a big thank you to Buck, Joanne, Tony, and Tom for sharing your experiences, and for everybody here just for being able to share and connect. I know I speak on behalf of all the members of our AXA staff who put a lot of work not only to these and the other site administrator series. It is really an honor and a responsibility that we all take very seriously to get the privilege to represent and try to support you folks who are doing this important work in the field. As a parent, obviously in my capacity at AXA, it's just, I'm blown away by just, every day what we hear, these stories, and just the gratitude and the energy and the love. I love how Tony put it, the love that you all are putting into your profession. So thank you for everybody. Thank you for joining us. Please be on the lookout. We're going to try to do a few more of these sessions. If there's anything that we can help, please don't hesitate to reach out. But thanks again for everybody joining us today.